Welcome everybody to episode 12. After a short break, I'm preparing something else, something for the patrons in the stream. So at some point something will happen and only the people following the stream and the patrons will get it. So still free, but you gotta attend the stream. Then eventually we'll go on YouTube, I'm sure, but not immediately. So, let's have a look at a couple of things super quick. Let's pull up Maya. So what are we gonna do today is bring some more completeness to our rig, so that we have more material to work with. Now, this is the trusty unicycle from last season, and we are gonna actually use that very briefly to show one thing. So show non-dag objects so that you can see the components as in their containers. Now I lock this down, and I know because I spent all of 5 minutes, well, not even, like 2 minutes making sure this actually worked before. So down there what I'm writing, which is down here, which is super tiny, so you can't bring up the script window. What I'm doing is, oh, need the default script editor, is lock node minus lock false, and that will unlock the nodes you have selected. We just want to lock this one. So I have talked about containers, Maya containers. They're called assets from 2015 on, tempted to say. I use them for encapsulation and for a little bit of interfacing because they're pretty convenient for that. Now, something that makes them extremely convenient on the encapsulation side, and you can use them just for that and they will be very unobtrusive, is how easy it makes it to export things. So if you take the head of our component, and this is another argument for dividing your components hierarchically like that, and you unparent it, then it's pretty trivial to do something like this, where you go asset, select asset contents. Actually, sorry, first you want to unblackbox it. Blackboxing, the other thing I quite like about components. They will clearly isolate your interface so that bits that you don't intend to be seen will disappear from the outliner and so on, without the fine granularity of the visible in outliner parameters that you have from 2016 or 17. Then you go asset, select asset contents. That should get you a bunch of nodes. Now, as that open my node editor window, yeah, probably here, but just leave the way. And you should get one component in here. So if you have use components for display selected, make sure that this is what happens. If you want to be triple sure, but as you validate the process, but I find this super reliable. Then the next thing you want to do is take away use assets and published attributes, and then look at the contents. You might even want to graph them out. That will bring in other elements, obviously, because these will be connected to items outside. That also makes it very easy to validate connections and the such. And that is basically about it. Now, once you've done that, the trivial bit that I like is if you do export selection, you don't really care about these because we're not nesting, we're using references. Take all of the inputs off. You don't need the history because you don't have meshes, but if you had them contained there, like if you had a procedural generation for one of the controls, like a circle operator on a curve, you will want that. Take off channels so that it won't look at connections. You might want to include expressions if you have them in your rigs, and constraints if you have them in your rigs, but provided they don't connect outside of your components. Texture info, you don't really care. And this is what I used to test. So you go export it, give it a name of any kind, export selection, and that is about it. So the next thing we're gonna do is bring back up, so this is unicycle, ball and legs. This should be the latest and greatest. Now, and I'll go over this because this might look unfamiliar. I've changed a couple of things, but it's nothing too serious. Come on, Give me a node editor. Okay, good boy. Now all you need to do is go import, pick up whatever it is that you want, and that is your component. So the import export side of components, and bear in mind we don't contain the container, so you will have to add the container itself to the selection if you want it. In this case I haven't containered the rest, so I did not want to have it, which is another thing I actually quite like. You can very easily make a containered export or an uncontainered export just by not adding or adding to the selection your Maya asset. That's it. You're just sorted out your entire import export for your rigging API. Now we will not show these. It will import things in a namespace. By default, that's part of the import options. Also something that is pretty good in case you want a validation step of sorts, because it could name clash if you don't let it do that. In this case, I don't think we have anything in here that we should be worried about, but we can have a look super quickly. Hopefully this is all making sense. It shouldn't be too hard. You know, we have something called debuffer. We've not used that name in anything we've done in so far. We have master control, and it's prefixed by the component name, so pretty unlikely to clash. Yeah, we should be pretty good. So if you prefix everything with the component name the way we do, you also have a non-issue at hand, which is good. And that's it really. Then the last thing you have to do, if you add that namespace on for safety, is you bring up your namespace editor, you delete the Godnode component namespace, and you can just go merge with root, and there you go. Now I believe, you know, I trust that that made sense, because it's not really anything much. And we will hide this for now and go over the leg very quickly. So I will either tonight or tomorrow night after the next stream make this scene file available, because enough has changed that you might want to pick it up and study it. But the changes aren't particularly significant. So what I've done is I've actually added control to be able to guide the guide, so moving the global space of the foot component, and that is fairly trivial connection so that it moves the ankle. Now there is one, not quite a bug, but there's a lacking, it's lacking a piece to fully work. Sometimes, well, all the time, because we've talked to our animators and that's what they desire, you want to have this control, the ankle one, you want it in the word space, so it needs to be aligned to the word space. But sometimes you want the foot to actually be aligned differently than that. That's the AK control, so that's just representing the word for us. And right now I think it's being modified by this, but not an issue yet. But sometimes people will want the foot roll to work on an axis that's slightly off from the actual ankle control. I find that most of the time people don't really like it, but if the model comes in a certain way, or if you're doing something that has its feet sideways and you want your foot roll component to be generic enough, so you want the feet to roll that way but this control to remain aligned towards space here, you need to take care of those things. So what I have done with this, there will be a tab when you open the scene with the whole leg in it, so you can actually look at this. It's, I think I've named everything, so you should be right. None of the functionality has changed at all. You still have this guy that basically moves around, changes the angles, reads and then sets the angles between these. I've properly hooked up everything that needs hooking up. This diagnostic, this is not linked to anything, and that's why you see it as off. There's no issues with that. The thing here is that our foot doesn't really have a tip as far as the actual foot component goes. We don't care for it yet. We might not ever care. But if you wanted to add a control here to pivot off the tip for, you know, the character putting out a cigarette on the ground or something, then you will want that, and in that case you could hook these diagnostics to that. So stream, I trust in you. Let me know, chat, if anything doesn't make sense. My daughter is hating this part apparently. She doesn't like foot rolls. And what else is in there? Not much really. Everything that I've done in here, so I've done it off stream because it's tough to do cleanup on stream. It takes a lot longer. This took me maybe 20 minutes of you know, dissecting the things we were doing and cleaning it up a bit. All the stuff that's been used is just the usual bunch of angle betweens, vector subtractions, and so on. Chat, let me know if this makes sense, if there's anything that, you know, you look at these and you go like, oh, I absolutely don't understand what is going on, too much has changed. Be surprised. I mean, all that happened is that it's a little bit prettier and it's aligned to the axis that we're working on, so that we don't have to manipulate something centerward and see it changing on a different plane. And next step. So, and I guess this stream is basically gonna be largely about getting ourselves a few more components. YouTube comments and people before said in chat, said yeah, it'd be cool to do another guided component. So we will make the entire rig guidable. That way we'll bring in the geometry without a care for where we're placing these things. We'll bring in the geometry, set the guide. We might have to rescale the guides because I'm not going to be doing guidable icon sizes, guidable manipulation sizes. It's kind of painful to do without one custom node. Yeah, and we'll have a fully guidable rig. Then we'll look at expand, like we'll look at doing a little bit of Maya graph stuff like evaluation and performance profiling, and then we'll expand the rig, monitor, optimize, and so on. Moving on, let's try and be snappy with these. So we did actually add a guide to this one. How foresightful of us, back when we did this one. For the unicycle, we didn't really care all that much about, you know, where these ended. We just placed one by the seat, one by the center of the wheel, and one centerward. I think it still works actually. I did not try that one, but I have faith in us. So what do we call this? We have word and the middle bit and the end. And the com is center of mass, I think we called it that. So it's yeah, it should be fine. So some people call it cog, which is a slightly different thing. That's the center of gravity. The center of mass is a different thing. Okay, I think we're good. Now let's, does it work? Oh yes, it does. Very good of us. Now let's say that we'll want these for some reason to be able to rotate the ball and legs from the crotch. Wow, she's singing. Sorry. She is singing now. And yeah, we're being good boys. Like, this is actually working. Well, I've been a good boy. If you've been a good girl or good anything in between, good on you. Now, that's about it. I think we can leave with these being the way it is right now. We'll probably want to hook to the guide end as far as our leg goes. So let's start with that. Now we won't do the space switching right away. We did show that in season 1, I believe, and we'll get to it. But I don't think that for let's say that this is mid-season. This is the episode after the mid-season break, where the series kind of reminds you of what was going on and sets things up for the remaining half. I have no idea if we're halfway through. So good with that. Let's get the node editor. We had an object somewhere that was emulating our input for the Godnode. Whoa, man, I've been tidy with these. I am genuinely surprised with myself. So let's start by saving these. And that's the bit that we want to replace. So we're going to the input for, with a word, we're going to the input for the start matrix, and that should be whole leg, word encode translate. So this is moving this item, the buffer for that item, which in the case of an IK leg is really all we have. The foot should still, the foot is properly limited and hooked up and limited to that ankle. So it seems like we have very little work to do. That start of the word thingy is also going into our leg pre-comp, so the leg global, because we do that limit twice to make sure that it's accounted for in the roll, and we produce the right offset that then we use in the leg. So what we do want to do is replace that. Let's get ourselves a new tab for that, and at 1 it should be good enough. We could go for 2. So there we keep an eye on what we're doing. Now the other thing we want to do is see if we have a valid output from our component. And what we did here, instead of outputting the matrix as an attribute, is we were adding actual objects so that things will track for our diagnostics and so on. It's not bad, like it's like this is entirely contractual. So if you stipulated that your rig looks like this, where you go like, look, I can add transforms because I want to simplify my life. I want hierarchy instead of having to do a ton of multiplications to have local and global spaces and so on. This is perfectly legit. Normally I would, in my personal system, you absolutely do not have to do that. It's entirely choice. I would not do these, and I would only add parameters so that I can keep the diet population at a minimum, support multiple outputs, because when we'll get to parallel level we'll explain it. But these, if you only have one of these and it brings in a ton of stuff from your component before going out to several components, that's an narrowing point. That could bottleneck your evaluation. Rarely, it's like it only happens for very, very, very dense components like a face, or very long tails with a ton of outputs that for multiple spaces that could in theory work in parallel otherwise, but up to you. Soundtrack provided by my daughter, that's excellent. How much can you guys hear of that? She coming in clear? Because this is a singing microphone, so it should be pretty clear. And so we want the word space of these plus an offset. Let's get ourselves that. And so matrix mode, mode matrix, yeah. Let's start. Pretty sure. All right. I'll show all attributes, Maya. Because the public interface for these, like one could never want a node that multiplies matrices to have a public interface with the matrices they want to multiply. There's someone in chat was saying, glad you can't hear the carnage in our house. I'm sure I'll get some of it. I've only got one. That makes it a little bit easier. So when you want an offset, and again, you can go and look at the pilot season. Sorry for that. You can go and look at the pilot season math episodes and some of the stuff we did with maths. When you want an offset, remember that offset is the first part in the multiplication. So you kind of say, okay, I want to offset this much, and then you multiply it by your word, which brings it where you need it to be. So in this case, I've connected these that way because yeah, okay, fair enough. Because I just wanted to pop the second element there. Come on, you can do it. No, you can't do it apparently. Oh, it keeps resizing this crap. Oh boy. And I don't even know, because it's not this array not being public, I can't even see if it's created ID elements that I don't want in there. Okay, let's redo that. And let's do a composition as well so that we have better control. Now this compose is just so that I have values that make sense to me. SRT, as good a mathematician as you might be, like creating orthonormal matrices in your head might be challenging. And in your head, did I say in your head? In your hand? I mean in your head, anyway. And sorry. I should be able to keep a straight face, but I'm not. And let's, come on, let's replace that and that. There you go. So that looks like it is doing what we expect it to do. Look at that. And that's good. That is what we want. Now, what we're doing here is moving the heap. So this is unlikely to change, for the record, because the heap doesn't need a space switch. And just saying, you know, once I have a mesh, I'm saying, look, the heap is going to be positioned here, and that's the end of the story. Deal with it. We will move things around, so we could plug in, you know, a node to move it around, but we can probably get away with doing this by eye. So we want to move it down the X. Let's say that the heap of our ball and legs is gonna be, we can do this full screen. The heap of our ball and legs is gonna be somewhere here. Maybe, yeah, something like that. We don't need to obsess about this. I don't know why I'm actually looking at this so clinically. You know, we're gonna, like, if you have odd values, like with many digits and stuff like that, that's usually a good thing, because you want a tough situation for the rig while you're building it, you know, within reason. Once you're out of like very early prototype, that way you test for more things. Now, this is what in the past, so this is obviously part of another component, and this is, and the SRT, yeah, this is part of an output. Sorry, I'm used to having the adjusting output there. So we're good. We're going from an output to inputs, nothing else in between. We don't need these any longer. We could call these, this is what we've called the underword in the past. So this is not part of any component. This falls intentionally between the cracks. So, and it's going to be all digi nodes and nothing else, which means they all end up in this big flat pool of names. So make sure you don't have name clashes, and an easy way to ensure that you don't, because nothing else should have this pattern, is choosing what it's connecting to. So since it's connecting to two items, you can be somewhat vague as long as you recognize these things. And since it's connecting to both the leg and leg global, I'm just gonna call it Godnode and leg heap offset SRT and be done with it. And then we'll keep the same pattern, and instead of the, yeah, this is still offset, let's call it just matrix, even if it's a matrix mode. Matrix mode is the operation, matrix is the data that we're interested in. What's next? We do want, and in these we have to be a little bit more precise, we do want another thing from these, which is going to set the word space for our up vector, and as well as for our actual foot control. So this is the part where the guide can get in the way, and that's why I was saying, look, you can do a guide, and that's a modality of the component, but when the rig gets to be fully working, unless you complicate the guide considerably, and it will eventually cost you performance, you will need a script or callbacks or something like that that both deletes the elements you don't need. Once the rig is guided, you don't want that guide in the way, and that might need a little bit of shuffling and cleanup. And the other thing is, like, if you look at this right now, my guide is driving the buffer for this ankle, but I want to drive the buffer for this ankle from the actual Godnode. So I'll need to disconnect the guide, make a mental note of reconnecting it at some point. Hopefully that makes sense. Now let's move on. We do want this same coupling of nodes. We would like to repeat it, and end word, I think have we been that disciplined? So this will be for our leg component. We might very well have been sorry, no, we haven't, because the guide is hooked up, but we have a parameter called endword, and remember that we're keeping, by being so flat with the hierarchy, we're keeping these in Maya's word space. So the ankle has a straight up SUT buffer which we should be able to hook up to. That's pretty good. So what we're gonna do to get the right offset right away is get a locator. Then we want to do the, so where do we want this? So this is again something, you know, if you have space switches, good, you can switch to whatever. You need to discuss the default, but if we're saying that this is how people control the word, we don't have anything above it, which is a little bit, you know, you normally want one more node that is hidden for crowd scene placements or another number of things, but we're saying this is how people drive the word of the character. So if the character is walking down that way, going like that, you know, then people will be expected to turn these around and move it that way. So that's normally what you want to hook up your word space controls to. That makes it almost too easy for us to do this work, because we can literally just grab the word transform of this. But if you had space switches and you wanted to drive the word from these in example, so that when the animator is rotating off the crotch, the IK follows in the pseudo FK mode, then you would have to get yourself the offset. So I got myself a locator I don't need because we have a much simpler problem here. We do get the offset, which most of the time hopefully will be hidden, or you know, it might be something that only tools touch. Again, that's a matter of contract. It's up to you to decide how it's gonna be used. I would also like not to see shapes, and next time I would also, oh, a new tab, so it won't pick up my settings from the previous ones. I'll need to look at the options, see if there's a way to set a default for these. Some of them I know there is, but not all, I believe, and that can be annoying. So word matrix and word. I don't know how much we're gonna get done that is gonna be spectacular this episode. We're, you know, mid-season, guys. The first episode starting from mid-season is always boring because it's just reminding you of stuff and being overly narrative. We got a format to follow. If you don't like it, you know, you gotta blame, like, I don't know, Netflix or whoever establishes these formats these days. End word is clearly affecting something, so let's undo that for a second and have a look at what we are getting. So, oh, we have been good actually. So we will want the, I lied actually, because we do want the buffer to this position right away. So I do need something to give me that transform, which should be fairly easy. Let's go for locator. So this is fully connected, which is good. I can plug something in there and expect it to be fine. And since I am driving it right away, let's get these in the right position. Seems legit. Yeah, seems legit. So that's just a temporary object to basically go, okay, in word space, and this is already right value, so I could just copy them. What its buffer is. The word space of these that I want to use as an offset is such and such. We do want, sorry for that, scratchy throat in the morning, terrible thing for a streamer. We do want exactly the same setup we had before. So 1 and 2, we should be able to duplicate special that. Add to graph on create. It might be rearranging everything for me. And okay, it's not, despite a duplicate special, it's not reconnecting them. I will show all attributes, and this should be fairly easy. So don't even need these actually, do I kind of do, because I want to save that value in a node without keeping this locator around, so let's keep it for now. So this is my locator now. If I take that offset, come on, and take the word matrix of that. That should be what I need. Now, before we saw it popping in there, which was the right thing to do because for it to do, because we already had those things hooked up. Being the clean and tidy proficient TDs we then just straight up do that. We should see that pop again, which is some stuff trying to go centerward. Now, because I've copied these nodes, this carries over values that we add in here. So you'll see it doing that thing. We are okay with that as well, like for the sake of completeness. If I zero these out, I expect a couple things like the limited encode to go centerward. So we're still good. Because this is mostly for the limits. This is being driven by the guide for now, but when we'll hook it up, you know, we would have seen that jump as well if we had already disconnected the guide. Now, that should be in the right place. Of course, this is not gonna show me the things that I might want to connect all the time because reasons, and we don't really care for scale. We're not doing a scaling rig just yet. So right now, if I move that locator, you can see that I'm basically moving the input of the component and getting the change I expect. So we're still good. Now, next thing is going back to, sorry, I was checking the chat real quick. Going back to these and looking at my whole leg. Where is it? Heap offset input. Heap word and so on. Let's have a quick look. Chat, still trusting you to tell me if this makes sense. It's pretty rote stuff by now, but who knows. So this is going in, we're good. Now the part that we want to change, we have to do a little bit of forensics work. There shouldn't be too much. This is the leg global guide. We're not interested in that. In these, if you open your node editor in this thing, you should come up with my tabs and all of that. And you should see like the entire layout for the leg and foot here in such a way that you can comprehend what is going on. Hopefully this is no add-on create, which is good. So global world word, ankle SRT. So this is taking the word space of that. Seems redundant. Might be, oh, this is just a conversion to SRT. Yeah, that's cool. We're okay with that. Then this is the guide for the ankle. Do we ever work cut out for us here? So let's have a look at this one here, which seems to be okay. Let's have a look. Basis heel. So I'll have to explain this when we get back into the foot roll, but a basis vector is basically, you know, in this case the way we're working, it will be this x1, this z1, this y1. Those are the basis vectors of our system. So sometimes when you do something where you can sort of rotate the word for that component, you're establishing a basis vector. Global control, the basis vector we're just using for some angle calculations. Guide heel might or might not be here. No, that's good. It's not going there. To tarsi. So the ankle is going somewhere. And that's the rest. Okay, that's good. So this is establishing the rest pose that we want our ankle at, which is okay. Yes, okay. Then ankle frame tarsi matrix will be what's driving the road. What have I got myself into here doing this without checking my graph first? And tarsi SRT, so this is actually going out to the leg global. I suspect I am, yeah, there you go. I should have gone backwards. So this is the buffer for our control, and it's literally getting this ankle like that. So we're good actually. We are fine. We can do this. And the end word converted to SRT, so that buffer is in word space. Not compose, it's decompose matrix is what we want. No? Yeah. And word. Now in some other user mode, this has decided to show me these things. How delightful. So there you go. That was surprisingly easy. I don't trust these, but I think I just did a decent enough job with the guide that it's, yeah, it's basically injecting so that all of the guide is being done in its relative space, and it's not really interfering with this stuff. Okay, this is the second time this has happened where, you know, by some stroke of luck, it turns out that something I thought would have been an issue is not an issue. I guess being tidy pays. That's a lesson here. So, still all making sense, hopefully, and we are gonna go for another like 10-15 minutes. So if there are questions in so far, please pile them up. Now, we are saying that now, and this is another thing I like about doing components the way I do them. If this is clearly between the input, like sometimes you go like you're in this weird headspace where you're going, okay, I'm doing the underword because I'm establishing connections between components. They need to fall into the cracks of the word. But sometimes as you do that, you know, you're connecting things that you need to do a little bit of work within the component. If you have a decent graph and you have clear input and output, it becomes self-explanatory. In fact, the script can very easily do the work for you to know if you just cross the boundaries and you go, okay, I'm adding to the component, not to something else. Or if you are in the underword. So let global, you're in the underword sounds more ominous than it's meant to be. And we are converting the end word, so we might be using this for more. In fact, we will very likely use it for more. Now, the other thing we're doing is we are doing that conversion. So we're offsetting something. We're getting the end word here. So we're getting this thing, which might be a bad idea. Because normally what you want to get is the master space that you hook to, so the Godnode component, and apply these offset internally. So again, another thing I like about working this way is eventually it becomes pretty clear. So this end word, this could be called local word frame or something like that. It turns out we are possibly misplacing these things. Heap, offset, and SRT. These really belong inside the component usually. Yeah, you can do it either way, don't get me wrong, especially if you foresee having duplicates, so you can save a few nodes. But we're transforming something from an output before it goes into the input. It might not be the bestest idea ever. So let's have a look. This end SRT is an output. Let me rename that because not my concern. So if I don't see output, I get confused. Okay. So we do probably want to move these back in. Start matrix. So okay, let's leave the reason I've put these in the underword is that they get reused the same way twice. We can leave them in there. So this isn't a hard rule, by the way. Like, it's perfectly legitimate to do this. There's nothing that says in the contracts we've established in so far. There's nothing that says that it's illegal. It makes your rig, your final rig, rely more on this underword than maybe you will want. So you might want that offset to be configurable and be inside the component. For now, we're gonna deal with this because it's not too unreasonable for this one. However, this offset here I don't like to be in the underword because the The app vector also needs the same treatment, and that needs a different offset than these. So do not like it. Now that's going input matrix, matrix sum. This is just an offset. So once we've set it, we don't care for these anymore, and we're good. So what we want to do is, should be pretty easy to fix as well, actually. So if I do that, I should still have the same exact result. Now if I cut this end word, which is now fitting, I should also be good. This word matrix is my actual end word, and that goes in there. And there you go. Nothing is changed as far as the transforms. Everything is correct, but we have moved these where it should be, where it belongs. So now this becomes like global. Oh, what is it? This is the ankle offset. And sure, let's indicate that all we care from these, all we care for coming from that is the matrix. This will be the, when you're doing these, I mean, you're juggling, mentally speaking, you're juggling a few knives, you're keeping quite a few knives at once in the air. I suggest that you name things right away. I am too stupid to not name things right away and find this stuff out later on. So this will be an ankle reparent, let's say, and in this case we're interested in the fact that it's a multiplication, so we'll call it a matrix mode. And I have to switch between mouse and pen because wacom drivers. And in this case we're taking the reparent and extracting its SRT. So not a super great name, but it's enough to get us by for now. These we will recycle, actually that one. This is fine as is. This is a good time to save. Chat, you are not reminding me to save. You are terrible people. This could have been a disaster, and I would have blamed it on someone else. So going back to it, and we want to repeat the same exact thing for the up vector, which I don't believe I am doing much with. So let me see, I have that. It's my daughter is cracking me up. I have that. Does not have any inputs. Man, we're gonna be so tidy with these. It's saving us a lot of time. You know, every dog has his day. Occasionally you gotta get a win. I'm sure I'm gonna pay the karmic debt for this going well with the next stream, or I don't know, a small meteorite will hit my house while I'm streaming or something. What do we want? We do want exactly the same network, except that we care for a different buffer. So we need a lot. Will you keep? No, you will not keep my connections, because duplicate special is not terribly special unless I have it set up. Let's sort that out. Let's see. Yes, it might be me. I might not have. There you go. Input graph. No, I don't want input graph, but do want input connections. I am sorry, Maya. I have blamed you, but oh, great. I didn't duplicate everything, but sure, we'll take it. Now, what is this? That, oh, because it's duplicated the connection, so when it's duplicated this node, this is one of the things that drives me crazy. When it's duplicated this node, it's preserved the old connection instead of going, oh, that's a duplicate, so I might want to swap that connection. We're okay, still better than before. Alright, guys and girls, please pile up the questions in chat if you have any, so that I can pick them up as we go, because I think we're closing it in 5 minutes. Well, we're starting on questions in like 5 minutes or less. Now, we do have this reparent. We do like our graph. What happens if I actually connect it? So rotate and translate. We're still not caring for scale. We'll literally do nothing. And there's a bit of an offset, which will, it's probably animation. We'll get to that in a second. So I should be able to just, no, I should not be able. What am I doing here? Now, I'm picking up an offset from somewhere else or something like that. Oh, what? Good lord. Why does it even let me do that? I was connecting something into the output matrix. It literally doesn't make sense. Anyway, this is in word space, so we can do these straight up. There you go. Now it makes sense. So I assume that this offset is just that I had numbers in here. Yes, no numbers. We're good. And is it actually affecting stuff? Yes. So we might have work to do to, like, we'll get to the IK leg like shortly. Like if you look at these offset, like there's clearly an issue here. You can see, and if I bet you that if I put this word space, it'd be looking more similar to that. There's something in the roll, something here that's not quite going well, so we have to debug that. Yeah, I reckon we have time to have a quick look at it. Something is still bringing things back down here, so during the reconnection phase I might have messed something up. So there is that. Oh, I did all this reoperating, but this end word was actually going out to other things as well, so we should be okay. It shouldn't be too bad. We do want to take, so this is going to the buffer, this is getting the matrix mode, this is the SRT. Let's have a look at what that is going out to. So it was going out to the hit word, so that's the start. The end word was going out to the foot ankle word, blah blah blah. So yes, pinning saved us. However horrible it is to deal with it in other cases, it did not rearrange my entire graph. Oh my. Now what do we care for? Ankle word. Now this is a straight up decompose, so it should be replaced by this decompose we're using here. And end word, we follow that through. What are we using here? So translate. Yes, by my reckoning this should come on, this should fixes. Possibly not. Yes, possibly yes. I just had to think for a little bit. I was trying to figure out, you know, what does it want in life. Little bit of rearranging to do here, nothing dramatic. Someone was saying maybe it's one of the variables in the IK expression. It's a good guess, as in if I, you know, if I didn't remember to look in here, which is just shoddy workmanship. In this case, like when you're altering something like this, when you're disconnecting an input, the way I did before, what I should have done was actually graph all of the output of that. Actually, I might even have had it in some fashion here, and that would have shown me that I needed to do more than one thing. I took one critical path, which is this one, move things along that critical path, and I forgot that it was more than one, but that's about it. And that looks like we have everything everything we want. I reckon this is a good enough place to leave it at for now, because we just successfully brought in the Godnode component. We have preserved the entirety of the guiding. So have I done this with a bunch of yeah, okay, this is not moving that ankle any longer, which is fine. It's what we would expect. It might still affect the rotation, yeah, and they'll be wonky because everything is going out of whack, but that's okay. However, I would expect the foot part of the guide to still be operational and to be doing sensible things. So yeah, ignore this length not matching, like look at these actually working. It's just that our diagnostics are at fault here. These might actually have trouble, sort of. Like normally what I was doing with the guide before, if you move these around, it would also offset your ankle control, which is what you would actually want. In this case, it's only changing the angles and lengths of my foot roll, so you're seeing that thing drifting. And yeah, and that's about it. Sorry, I got distracted for a second from chat. So this seems good enough to leave it. And there's one question that's a good question, so I'll pick that one up. Put any other questions in chat. If not, we're gonna call it. So the question is, I had a quick question about the limit on the IK joints to prevent IK pop. Would you also limit the FK joints to the same amount so you can snap between the two states? Honestly, no, and we'll do, it's a good question, and we'll do FK soon. You know, once we get to these, I would like to do the FK, like all this cleanup and hooking and all of that, which seems to be almost done. We'll add the FK to the leg because if we're gonna do another guidable component, I think the leg is an interesting case. We'll see if I want to spend more time on the foot right now to make it like truly and fully guidable and godly, but I think that will require some scripting. So we'll get into detail once we start talking about the FK. We'll do more about that pop than just limiting, but for the quick answer, no, I wouldn't limit the FK joint. Oh, the screen is buzzing. The green screen is buzzing. I wouldn't limit it, mostly because there's no reason to limit the FK. The FK is not going to exhibit that pop. So if that makes sense, the IK exhibits it because what you're controlling is this linear thing that has, you know, that strong effect on your actual angle, and you see the pop. The FK, people will animate the rotation directly. So what is gonna happen, and we could, so let me fix that super quick. Hopefully I can fix it super quick, or make it worse super quick. Yes, I definitely did make it worse. Alright, I'll have to disable the green screen for now because I suspect that the buzzing is more annoying than having a green screen in the back. Cool. So here's what is going to happen and why you might want to limit it. The thing is, people will use FK to break the rig, and that's okay. If you do what we say, which is, look, you put the limit to something like this, and it gets a little bit trickier when you have stretching now, and you have the mesh. Let's see, I don't think I can draw a straight line here. Is there? Nah, I need to look up if there's a shortcut. Whatever, imagine this is a relatively straight thing. Now the problem you're gonna have is that if you consider it a problem, if your FK can go all the way to straight or almost straight, the result on your mesh is that you're gonna get something that kinks out like that. Now, beside the fact that the human knee can actually do a little bit of that, so you know, up to you how you set the angles and all. If you want to get a little bit of settling, kind of like going backwards like that. On elbows even more so. Some people can straighten their arm and their elbow bends in the wrong way. So that's your only problem basically, but you're not gonna have a pop in the FK because the FK has a linear relationship between, you know, its function curve and this angle here. Do you care for the matching? Like during the blending, same thing, we'll show it. What we will blend has nothing to do with the IK itself. What we will blend is basically getting this straight up hierarchy into, you know, like that, into the deformation stage. We'll use that as our output. And we do have this angle. This is what we're actually computing. So when you want to blend, you basically look at the same angles in the FK, and you literally do a linear blend between two single numbers, and you are good to go. Now the FK might add off axis, so in that case the off axis, or the known, straight up rotation on the x of these will be 0 for the IK, because we keep it constrained. You might have to consider the word, because your IK could be doing that. So it depends on whether you want to blend the parent of the FK and the parent of the IK that gives it the swivel in some way, or if you want to do everything straight up from one bone and risk the gimbal lock case. So that will all depend. But that's a very long answer to a reasonably short question initially. There's no real numerical reason to limit the FK. It's entirely aesthetics and what you want the tactile feeling of the rig to be like, where you want the limits to be, if that makes sense. I also I'm not super fond of the idea of locking things that are controllable directly, like the FK, or even the ankle. Like some people say, oh, if you lock the ankle, the distance of the ankle control, you're not gonna have a bunch of problems right away. I don't like it. And I don't animate, but I find that if I were to animate, and a lot of the animators I've talked to, if I move something here, I don't want it to stop here while my cursor is reached there. I want the rig mechanics to do the right thing and know their limits and stop where they need to, but my control needs to follow my mouse, and that's the end of the story. And FK is very much like that, especially because the Maya manipulators for the rotation can be a bit wonky, especially when you go past the 180, but whatever. And if I rotate something this much and my manipulation stops there, I'm gonna be pretty annoyed by it. So yeah, anyway, the only difference you have is gonna be reflected in the mesh. The rig will be absolutely fine, and it might be, you might want to let people break that leg. And instead of making a rig that can be broken by design in every possible state, if you make sure people are unconstrained by the FK and very constrained by the other more sensitive and trickier parts like IK, you're normally going to get less complaints and less rig revisions. So I will give it 1 minute for the stream to catch up, the delay and all of that, and if not, I am actually going to scoot out. Also, I was recording, which is good. For a moment I thought, did I start the recording? Yes, I have. Alright, nothing forthcoming. I'm gonna call it. So thanks everybody for watching. If you follow the stream, next one is tomorrow, so less than 24 hours from now. If you're on YouTube, you can watch it whenever you want. Have a good day everybody, and I am out of here.